All right, we back again, y'all. Somebody's gonna throw another one up here real quick. Um, we're gonna have in this book series about these Khazars. We're gonna be showing you some videos uh, of these people that a lot of people admire and like have on their wall, and like this tonight. This one is gonna be about Marcus Garvey. Because you got to understand, again, I always tell y'all, man, stop believing in these pastors, stop believing in these men. You know, they had these great movements behind them, but the people that's behind them is blind. We only have one king. We only have one leader, and that is Yahuwah. Anybody else, trust me, they're going to let you down because we can't see behind the scenes. But the Father says his eyes go all through the whole earth. So I want you to keep that in mind. So we're just gonna go ahead and go with the video. Um, yeah, and I think you're gonna enjoy this video too. There's really no prayer even needed for this one. Because again, like I said, I was gonna piggyback off the other one real quick. Uh, but yeah, y'all need to see this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this rolling. All right. And by the way, this brother Karemio, oh man, real good historian. Does a lot of good information. I'm gonna put a few of his videos up here. And but yeah, I mean this guy is awesome. You know, he get a chance to write this name down and go look at some of his videos. They long, but boy, I'm talking about this guy does some really, really deep research. And so, you know, I always like I always do, I always try to turn everybody on to different people that I know. You know, I mean, I don't know him personally, but I look at so many things, y'all, because I'm trying to get this thing to the. I want salvation too, and then whatever's gonna help me see more truth, that's what I deal with. So I'm sorry, I ain't gonna talk too much, but y'all go ahead and watch this. It's about almost it's like 48 minutes. If it get too long, like I always tell you. I mean, for those I know I got some out there that's really seeking this thing. I got some out there. It just depends on the person. If you can't, you don't have a long attention span, just stop the video and come back and look at it. But people I know that like got mind like minded like me, we're gonna watch this whole video, especially when he get to rolling. All right, y'all.
All right, we're in this paper, Miscegenation, Eugenics, and Racism, Historical Footnotes to Loving versus Virginia, 1988. This is by Paul Lombardo. All right, so it says Paul Lombardo is an attorney at law, Sacramento, California. All right, the author wishes to acknowledge the assistance and encouragement of Professor Walter Wallington, whose premier scholarship on Loving versus Virginia is the starting point for this essay, who generously pointed out the existence of the John Powell collection upon which it focuses, the John Powell. All right. Just want to get into sign here because we're going to hear this later on. It says, although eugenic rhetoric clearly influenced the passage of these laws, the role of eugenicists who lobbied for the Virginia Racial Integrity Act has escaped the general attention of scholars. This essay explores private correspondence contained in the John Powell collection, a set of restricted manuscripts along with contemporary news accounts and government documents. This material explains how two Virginians, John Powell and Walter A. Plecker, all right, used eugenics and their association with the white supremacist Anglo-Saxons Club of America, the ASCOA, all right? Remember that. White supremacist group, all right? To lobby for the passage of Virginia's miscegenation law, the Virginia Racial Integrity Act of 1924, and its subsequent amendments. Says Powell, a prominent composer and pioneer, founded the ASCOA, under whose sponsorship the Virginia legislation was originally proposed. All right. We're in this college article. It says strange bedfellows, eugenicists, white supremacists, and Marcus Garvey in Virginia, 1922-1927, by Sarah L. Trembanis, College of William and Mary, Arts and Sciences. All right. And it says this is a thesis presented to the faculty of Department of History, the College of William and Mary, in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the degree of Masters of Arts, all right, by Sarah L. Trembanis. And it says here in the beginning, in the abstract, it says this study examines the eugenics movement in Virginia in the 1920s. During this time period, eugenicists had some of their greatest legislative success in Virginia with the passage of the Racial Integrity Act and a voluntary sterilization law. Both of these statutes had considerable effect on poor and non-white Virginians and lasted well into the 1960s. Yet Virginia was also the site of one of the great failures of the eugenics movement. The three leading Virginia eugenicists, John Powell, W.A. Plecker, right, Plecker, and Ernest S. Cox, right, failed to ignite a national movement or to incite other states to pass similar legislation, despite the implications and contemporary importance of Virginia's eugenics laws. Historical scholarship had largely ignored the Virginia eugenics movement. In addition to filling the gap in scholarship on the Virginia eugenics movement, this thesis will also interrogate the unlikely alliance of Virginia eugenicists formed with Marcus Garvey, as the importance of both the Virginia eugenics movement and Garvey's Back to Africa movement began to wane. Garvey, Powell, Plecker, and Cox found common ground in their strong belief in the primacy of racial essentialism. All right. All right, we're in page 47, chapter 2 of this article. It says, an unlikely alliance. In 1925, the Negro world sparked a controversy when an editorial linked John Powell and the Anglo-Saxon Clubs of America with Marcus Garvey, all right, founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. The official weekly publication of the UNIA, The Negro World, was first published in 1918. Garvey was the first editor of Negro World, and even as others took over the editorial staff, he continued to write front-page editorials for each issue entitled Fellow Men of the Negro Race. The Negro World, much like Garvey himself, was quite controversial for its time and was even banned by most of the British West Indies. By 1925, however, Garvey, who at the time was incarcerated at a correctional facility in Georgia, could not control the content of the weekly. Therefore, as a result of the Negro World editorial, both Powell and Garvey wrote letters of protest to the paper. These men did not refute their personal connection and reciprocal admiration, but challenged instead the editorial's assertion that Garvey and Powell, through ASCOA, had conspired in an attack on Hampton Institute. Powell's letter denied the allegations of leading a charge on the Institute while expressing support for Garvey's Back to Africa movement. And it says here, I, Powell, told Marcus Garvey that in his appeal to the soul of white America, he had profoundly touched and moved at least one white American. In return, he assured me that he and the UNIA were unalterably opposed to racial amalgamation. It has been charged that I have involved Marcus Garvey in an attack on Hampton Institute. This charge is false. In a letter I wrote him, which was carried by Richmond papers, I stated that Garvey and the UNIA would approve all efforts towards the preservation of racial integrity. All right, listen to that. Talking about the Racial Integrity Act. Garvey's name was mentioned in no other connection. I trusted this letter has made 2 points clear. First, that Marcus Garvey has been guilty of no betrayal of his race for his cause. Second, that there are in Richmond and I believe throughout the South many sincere white friends of the Negro race who resent the injustice done to Marcus Garvey and who wish him Godspeed in his great work to build for his people a nation and culture of his own. Now remember, Powell and all these people, they're eugenicists. Do you know what they were doing to black women? They were sterilizing them. They were doing so many bad things to the ancestors, to people, so-called Negro people, all right, the aboriginals. Yet, oh, we have Negro friends, right? Oh, but I have a Negro friend. I'm not racist. We heard that before, right? Garvey's letter, while more inflammatory, echoed Powell's sentiments. However, Garvey's response illustrated his discontent with his lack of control over the Negro world and his desire to maintain authority within UNA and its publications. I am surprised that the editorial Negro world of today date under caption of Marcus Garvey in White American Society, in which I am mentioned as making statements in regard to Messrs. Cox and Powell of Richmond, Virginia, and their respective societies. I know nothing of the spirit of editorial which I regard as mischievous. I repudiate the attack upon these two friends. These two friends, those are his friends, eugenicists. These two friends, he wrote this. All right, check out the source, number 6. All right, check out the book. Go get the source. All right, he wrote this. These are his friends, these eugenicists who are doing evil things to aboriginals and their sterilization and all the stuff they were trying to do, create a white race. Do you know what happened during the eugenics movement? Do you know what they did? Go research it. But those are his friends, all right? So he's backing them up because his own newspaper was talking shit about what he was doing with them. You understand? So he had to. They both had to write a letter. It's a publicity thing, all right? When he said these are my friends, these are my secret order friends, who have given no cause to be thus insulted. I further object to my name being used in an editorial of that nature, attacking an organization of persons without my knowledge and approval. You will please reproduce this in its entirety. The policy of the organization has been defined by me more than 1,000 times, and there has been absolutely no change on my part. It says Garvey's cooperation and public support of John Powell and ex-Cox can be understood only through an examination of Garvey's background, as well as the similarities and differences between Garvey's black separatism and the Virginia eugenicist white supremacy. All right, Garvey and the Virginia eugenicists desired national recognition, practical success, and the ability to control private choices regarding sex and marriage when they involved issues of race. At the center of all their goals was their complete devotion to what they believed was the betterment of their respective races. These similarities allowed them, as Tony Martin has noted, to form not an all-embracing alliance, but instead a practical working relationship. By the early 1920s, Marcus Garvey had entered both the climax and start of the decline in his leadership of one of the most controversial African American movements. Having established the UNIA, Garvey began raising funds and purchasing ships for his Black Star Line, which he hoped would eventually provide the transportation for his Back to Africa movement. So, that was the whole plan, right? He was getting all this money, funding, right? But what he do with his money? He bought some ships, right? Which he started a business from, right? But this was the plan to go back to Africa, to use them to take, but it never happened. He used it all for his profit, which he hoped, again, all right? But instead, he was trying to transport who? Aboriginals to Africa? Continuing, he says, Garvey had other critics outside the NAACP. Tony Martin posited that the United States was against him because they considered all blacks radicals subversive. European governments were against him because he was a threat to the stability of their colonies. The communists were against him because he successfully kept black workers out of their grasp. Among all this dissension, Garvey declared friendship with both ASCOA and the Ku Klux Klan. I think it was the Clubs of America. That's that white supremacist club, that openly. All right, so he declared, all right, even before his association with ASCOA, African American community leaders had already criticized Garvey regarding his relationship with other white supremacists. Previously, they had been criticized Garvey for attending a meeting with one of the Ku Klux Klan leaders, Edward Clark. Garvey engineered the meeting to win over Southern supporters and to discuss their similar views on Jim Crow laws, which both Garvey and Clark favored. Garvey's anti-integrationist stance contributed to the animosity with Du Bois. Both Garvey and Clark would face great criticism for the meeting from the members of their separate organizations, and as a result, the association between the two would end. Clark was expelled from the Klan while the NAACP attacked Garvey. A Philip Randolph and Chandler Owen named his race Baiter and race traitor. Garvey's interactions with Powell and ASCOA would be more successful for all concerned, yet still resulted in negative publicity, such as the Negro World editorial. Nevertheless, Garvey maintained a friendly and reciprocal relationship with Powell and ASCOA. On a trip to New York, Powell gave a speech to the UNIA on racial purity. To ensure his acceptance, Garvey penned the letter of introduction for John Powell by Marcus Garvey, which highlighted Garvey's appraisal of Powell and ASCOA. We're going to read those letters, all right? Continues, says Powell was convinced of the value of Garvey's colonization movement. Before the two of them became publicly aligned, in fact, it was once again his wife-to-be, Louise Bourlet, who helped him convince friends such as Ernest S. Cox that Garveyism if successful, would benefit white Americans as much as it would black Americans. Why would it benefit white? Because they would then send all these aboriginals to Africa, so they wouldn't claim their land, so they wouldn't be like, "Yo, you took our land, give it back." Garvey at the same time spoke publicly about white America's efforts to mandate segregation in favorable terms. Instead of stressing the inclusion of blacks in white society, he spoke about the need for both races to maintain their purity. It was this idea of the benefits of race purity and the advocacy of similar policies that allowed Garvey and Powell to find a common ground, even if their support for racial purity differed. I mean,
Find out what your home is worth instantly. Just enter your address into Redfin's free home estimate tool.
so if you think that America is a white society, I mean, it is, they control it, but it's not theirs to be a society too, right? Like it's up to us to change that. This is your land. It's a indigenous society. This is the terrestrial prize. This is the ancient society. The builders, the mound builders, the architects, right? The teachers of the world, right? The cons, right? So this is your society. And so this is a short period which it has become a white society. You've been here for thousands of years. That's only been like that for a couple hundred. All right. So you can get it back. All right. So, just giving it to them and saying, let's just go to Africa. That's not the way. I don't think, And continues, it says, Powell asserted his adherence to Garvey's Back to Africa movement in a letter to Thomas Dabney, noting that he believed geographical separation is the only possible means of preserving racial integrity. Plecker and Cox shared this sentiment, all right? Plecker also, all right, shared the same sentiment with Garvey. According to Plecker, there is only one absolute solution to the problem, advocated by Lincoln and more recently by Major Ernest X. Cox in his splendid work, White America. All right, we're going to see what that is about and how Marcus Garvey loved this book. And look what it says. It says, this solution is the gradual deportation of the Negroes. All right. So that idea to go back to Africa was already being talked about by these people, these white supremacists, these eugenicists. In his book, White America, we're going to read later on, right? All right. And how they pushed it, how Marcus Garvey's followers pushed it and loved the book. It was basically already talking about deporting the Negroes. I mean, where else would they were thinking about deporting them, right? Africa. This was their idea. All right. Garvey. All right. It says here, Virginia Commonwealth University. It says the non-musical message will endure with it. The change in reputation and legacy of John Powell, by Karen Adam. Again, from the Virginia Commonwealth University. And we barely flew up to page 35, and it says here, Powell explained that the pessimistic mood of My Negro Rhapsody is no more than recognition of the gloomy outlook for the Negro's racial development in a white country. All right, Powell believed that the Negro's racial development could be improved by deporting all African Americans to Liberia. All right, not just Marcus' idea. To that end, in the pinnacle of irony, the Anglo-Saxons Club of America formed a relationship with Marcus Garvey, the black leader of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. All right. Claudrina N. Harold, author of The Rise and Fall of Garvey Movement in the Urban South, explained that some outsiders looked with confusion at the alliance between Virginian Garveyites and the ASCOA, the Anglo-Saxon Clubs of America. However, black and white separatists were alike in several ways, obsessed with the issue of miscegenation. Black nationalists and white supremacists tended to openly advocate racial purity. Webb Du Bois, in his essay entitled Marcus Garvey, criticizes the alliance. In his opinion, the association between two groups signaled Garvey's descent from progressive and healthy nationalism towards self-centered and reactionary nationalism and Napoleonic complex. I just wanted to come here. This is Encyclopedia Virginia Humanities. All right, and just talk about one of the persons that we're going to be talking about in this video. His name is Ernest Severe Cox, scientist and explorer, it says. All right. So it says Ernest Severe Cox, all right, is a committed white supremacist who advocated on behalf of anti-miscegenation laws in 1922, co-founded with the composer John Powell, the Anglo-Saxons Club of America, all right, the ASCA. All right, they're going to abbreviate that. In Richmond-based nationwide organization devoted to maintaining strict separation of the races. In 1923, Cox published White America. All right, Reporting, a book that described his travels in Africa and argued that race mixing would result in the collapse of white civilization. He also wrote extensively on eugenics, a now discredited scientific movement aimed at proving the superiority of the white race. All right. Together with composer Powell and Virginia State Register Walter Plecker, Cox played an influential role in lobbying the Virginia General Assembly to pass the Racial Integrity Act of 1924, a strict anti-miscegenation law, and later the Massenburg Bill, which banned racial mixing in all public places. In 1924, Cox formed an unlikely alliance with the black nationalist Marcus Garvey, an alliance on their shared belief that only way to save the races was for African Americans to relocate to Africa. And remember, this was you're gonna hear later that this was actually in the book White America, so it was actually his idea, not Garvey's. Garvey just liked the idea and he loved this book we're gonna read later. All right, and all his followers. So he was cool with them relocating to Africa. All right, we're in this book. It's called the Marcus Garvey and Universal Negro Improvement Association Papers. All right, and this is one of their volumes. I don't know which one it is, but we're in this part of the book where they're talking about, Marcus Garvey and him and Ernest Cox going back and forth with letters. All right, Cox, remember the supremacists, the white the eugenicists and everything. And it says here, "Dear Mr. Cox, I sent you a telegram this morning." This is Marcus Garvey, right? "Which I trust you have received. As stated therein, I have just completed reading the book White America." All right, this book he wrote, Mr. Cox. "It is wonderful. From the white man's point of view, it is a masterpiece in history, ethnology, and general race literature. Is a masterpiece," he's telling him, this eugenicist white supremacist. "It should be in the hand of every intelligent white person, not only in America, but Europe, South and Central America, as also in the hand of every intelligent Negro. I do not and cannot agree with much of the historic data in reference to the black man. As a Negro, I have opinions of my own, but I fully appreciate the fact that you have written from the white man's viewpoint, and in that I heartily agree, and I'm in full sympathy. If I were of your race, I would have written with the same force and probably with prejudice. You have been as fair as anyone could expect under the circumstances." Oh, you're being fair, Mr. Eugenicist. "You have been much more liberal than the average writer or author. History, as you know, ancient, is largely doubtful and highly speculative. The points of vantage credited to the one race can be easily claimed by the other. Again, the points of vantage credited to one race can easily be claimed by the other, yet that is not a matter of dispute between us. The fact is that the modern Negro is lazy, good-for-nothing slumberer." He's calling you what? A lazy, good-for-nothing slumberer. That was Marcus Garvey's view of you. "This is my conviction arrived at my close and careful study and experience, and if something is not done for him, he will die as other unfit races have." What race died? What are you talking about? Like the apes? What is he talking about? Like the Cro-Magnon? What is he talking about? What race died? "The mongrel in our midst is a danger to both races, and it is equally dutiful to black and white to stem the tide. You have had to say things to your race, and I to mine, that could have been left unsaid if the mass or even the average were more intelligent or concerned. They are both misled and indifferent, and for that they must be aroused. Hence the wonderful usefulness of White America." He loves this book. "Your book should be endorsed by every white man and institution of note. Only cowards will not do it, and unfortunately we have so many. It takes courage to write a book as White America, and for that you deserve the everlasting gratitude of your people. Few Negroes can understand it. Those who care are too tricky to correctly interpret it to the rest of their people. Fellows like Du Bois will twist its meaning and purpose for propaganda to becloud the issue. Such hypocrites are the Negro's greatest enemies. I promise you all the support I can give to carry out the general plan. I promise you, Mr. Cox, Mr. White Supremacist, Mr. Eugenicist who is killing and sterilizing Aboriginal women. The educated Negro is not honest." Again, he said, the educated Negro is not honest. He is a rogue, and that is why it is so hard to make internal progress. All right, Marcus Garvey. "The lowdown of the whites encourage him to be rogue among his own people, hence the great difficulty to get honesty in mass movements. Like the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the common ordinary people are all right. To me, they are the best people in the world. They are praying and looking for leadership, but the educated rogues prey upon them and lead them astray. Convey my best wishes to Mr. Powell and Dr. Plecker, Mr. Garvey, look, and assure them of my cooperation and support for the cause. With best wishes, yours sincerely, Marcus Garvey. He said, what? Make sure you tell my boys, Mr. Powell, Mr. Plecker, Walter Plecker, Racial Integrity Act. What did he do to the Aboriginals? What did he do, man? He tried to exterminate paper genocide. But what did Marcus Garvey say? I assured you my cooperation and support for your cause. What is your cause, Mr. Plecker? What is your cause, Mr. Powell? White supremacists, what are your causes? Eugenicists, what are your causes? My best wishes, yours sincerely, Marcus Garvey. P.S. You may show this letter to my wife when she interviews you and make it a part of our topic for discussion with her. Where in this book now says Science for Segregation, Race Law, and the Case Against Brown versus Board. By John P. Jackson Jr. John P. Jackson. Sorry, it says here, by the time Garvey and Cox, remember Garvey and Cox, Ernest Cox, the white supremacist, says by the time they started corresponding, Garvey was in prison for mail fraud for financial improprieties surrounding his steamship line. Garvey viewed his imprisonment as a political act instigated by those within the civil rights movement who opposed his focus on racial pride. He had turned to white supremacists in part because he sought political allies against racial moderates such as the NAACP and other mulattoes whom he despised. He, his wife, Amy Jacks Garvey, and Cox corresponded regularly with Cox, offering his support to Garvey's repatriation until Cox's death in 1965. Alright, so this dude Cox, who I got in another book, I don't know if we find it today, but he was out helping, he was trying to get funding. He was trying to get white people to fund the Back to Africa movement to help Garvey. He was helping Garvey get that funding. Alright, so it tells you here a little bit that he was offering his support to Garvey's repatriation. Alright, Cox dedicated a short pamphlet, Let My People Go, to Garvey, and Garvey advertised White America in the pages of UNIA publications, White America, the Supremacist Book. Cox's relation with the Garvey and the UNIA was severely circumscribed, however, while both shared an interest in black reparation to Africa. For Garvey's movement, repatriation was not necessarily the driving force for the membership. In his study of Garveyite membership, Emory Tolbert found that the UNIA was an important alternative to the middle-class NAACP for many members. But few even acknowledged that the migration of all blacks back to Africa was the explicit or implicit goal of the UNIA. While Garvey advocated that African Americans establish a new geographic homeland in Africa, the core of his philosophy was built an ideal of racial separatism and self-help in order to achieve that goal. Alright, again, white supremacists backing him up. Alright, we're in the University of Lynchburg. Alright, it says here undergraduate thesis and capstone projects, White and Everything Else, promoting the 1924 Virginia Racial Integrity Act by J. Casey Gilliam. Alright, University of Lynchburg. Alright, and just going down to this part right here, talking about Plecker, says a few of Plecker's ideas for advertising the law outside of Virginia may strike some as odd as unorthodox to promote the law. Plecker went as far as commissioning a film on the issue. Plecker had begun contacting sales manager for the National Motion Pictures Company located in Indianapolis to receive copies of 2 films, but also to begin discussions on creating a film on racial integrity in collaboration with local Richmond filmmaker. Although the film was never created, Plecker's interest shows the lengths that he would go to encourage racial integrity. It says Plecker even wrote U.S. President Calvin Coolidge an appeal for the pardon of Marcus Garvey, the staunch advocate of Pan-Africanism and the resettlement of Africa, for his mail fraud charge. One of Garvey's chief aims is to inspire his people with the desire to preserve their racial purity and to teach them abhorrence of mongrelization as it is progressing in South, in spite of restrictions as to intermarriage and other sections at a rapid rate because of the lack of such restrictions. In the case of the film and his plea for the release of Marcus Garvey, Plecker sought to promote the law in more creative ways rather than just petitioning interested parties, as was usually done. Alright, so friends, right? Remember Marcus Garvey wrote to him, my friend, I hope you're doing well, my friend. Alright, so one of the persons that, wrote a letter, Plecker wrote a letter to pardon Marcus Garvey. Why? Because Marcus Garvey was important to them, because he was helping them trick people into thinking they were African, and he was helping them with their ideas of resettling all these free people of color into Liberia and all these other places in Africa, all right? You see? All right, we're in this book now. It's called What Comes Naturally, Miscegenation Law and the Making of Race in America by Peggy Pascal, all right? And it says here, Garvey's belief in racial purity soon translated into concrete support for miscegenation laws. In June 1925, he wrote to Walter Plecker, idol Ernest Sevier Cox. So he wrote to Walter Plecker's idol. All right, we're gonna get that, his letter to him, some of it. All right, author of the virulently racist tract "White America." All right, so he wrote to Walter Plecker's idol, Ernest Sevier Cox, author of the virulently racist tract "White America" and a strong supporter of the Virginia Racial Integrity Act, to say that he hoped Cox and his white supremacist colleagues would get Georgia to bring about a similar law as exists in Virginia. So you hear that? Marcus Garvey is hoping that these people get to do the same thing they did in Virginia with the Racial Integrity Act in Georgia. So they can do the same thing to the Aboriginals, to the indigenous people in Georgia. Why would he want that? Then in August 1925, Garvey's wife, who represented him during his stint in prison, set out on an errand that led to one of the most bizarre moments in the history of miscegenation law. On a hot summer day in Virginia, Amy Jacques Garvey, trailed by reporters, stopped by Plecker's office at the Virginia Bureau of Vital Statistics. She went to meet with Plecker. According to the Richmond Daily Times Dispatch, Plecker was out of the city, but Garvey nonetheless assured officials in the office that Virginia's racial integrity law has the support of millions of Negroes throughout the country. Whoa. So he was saying that a lot of the Aboriginals, like millions of them, supported the Racial Integrity Act? Who's he talking about? Who supported? Is he talking about his friends? Who's he talking about? His Masonic Pan-African friends? What is he talking about? How can he agree and support something that's misclassifying Aboriginal, indigenous people into Negroes, into colored people, into white, all right, giving them tags, killing their culture and identity? How could he support that? How could he say millions of people, of Negroes are supporting that? All right, I'm adding this other book is called Marcus Garvey, Black Nationalist, Crusader, and Entrepreneur by Brenda Hagen. All right, this is the cover. All right, Marcus Garvey by Brenda Hagen. Says content advisor is Keith Mays, PhD, assistant professor, Department of African American and African Studies, University of Minnesota. Reading advisor Rosemary G. Palmer, PhD, Department of Literacy, College and Education, Boise State University. All right. All right, and we're in chapter 8 of this book. It says Marcus Garvey must go. It says Marcus Garvey's fierce love for his own race often put him in an unusual position. It sometimes led him to agree with some of America's most noted white racists. This in turn caused him to make enemies among members of his own race. Such was the case when Garvey decided to meet with the imperial wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, KKK, a white supremacist group. Wow. On June 25, 1922, during a speaking tour, Garvey met for 2 hours in Atlanta, Georgia, with Edward John Clark, the leader of the KKK. During the meeting, which was held at Clark's request, Garvey and Clark each shared their beliefs. Clark and his followers believed that the United States belonged to the whites. He explained that the KKK wanted to keep, all right, and this, look at this image right here. Look at this. All right, so this is who he was getting down with and meeting with. All right. So it says again that he explained that the KKK wanted to keep the white race pure, meaning it did not believe in intermarriage between races. He also tried to convince Garvey that the KKK wasn't responsible for as many incidents of violence toward blacks as it was accused of. All right. He's like, we didn't do that, Garvey. We promise we didn't do those things, Garvey. He's like, okay, I believe you. Garvey had written several editorials criticizing the KKK, whose members had threatened and even beaten some UNIA organizers in the South. Really? And so you're still meeting with him. After the meeting, Garvey said he believed that groups such as the KKK represented what white Americans really thought, that whites were superior to all other races. Garvey outraged even some of his own supporters by saying that the KKK and UNIA were alike in some ways. All right, listen to this. He said, the Ku Klux Klan is the invisible government of the United States of America. We know that, right? The Ku Klux Klan expresses to a great extent the feeling of every real white American. The attitude of the Universal Negro Improvement Association is in a way similar to the Ku Klux Klan. Well, whilst the Ku Klux Klan desires to make America absolutely a white man's country, the Universal Negro Improvement Association wants to make Africa absolutely a black man's country. All right, so let's go to back Africa, right, Garvey? Because everybody's African. The meeting with Clark served to cement in Garvey's mind the belief that blacks would never find equality in the United States. He believed even more firmly now that UNIA should move forward with plans to create a strong government in Africa for the benefit of black people worldwide. All right, so let's start sending all the dark-skinned people of the world to Africa. Let's make a black continent. That's what Garvey was saying. It's like two extremes, white and black, right? Extremists, all right? Separated. So in a way, it sounds like great, like, oh yeah, no, but it's just like the whole hijack. Let's go to Africa because you're African. Maybe he was misinformed, but as a Freemason, I don't think he was misinformed. All right, we saw the Masonic books, right? Some pale-faced people here, European descendants, right? Who supposedly own the land. They think they own the land and they're foreigners. And he's agreeing with them. He's telling them, yeah, you guys are, this is your country. That's why we need to go to Africa. I see that you guys have it held down here, because I know you guys have it held down here, because I go to your secret meetings. I know what your plans are. Maybe I can go do the same over there in Africa. All right? But these is, I guess, his friends, right? His white supremacist friends. All right.
Veterans United presents Through the Roof Reviews with Rob Riggle.
I'm here with Veterans United customer Cheryl, spouse of a U.S. Navy veteran.
Hello.
You left a 5-star review that said, home at last. The process took less.
All right, so we're in this book now. It's called Marcus Garvey, and it's edited by David Cronon. Great Lives Observed. All right. This is the cover of the book. All right. All right, so it says here that E. David Cronon, the editor of this volume in the Great Lives Observed series, is a professor of history and director of the Institute of Research in the Humanities of the University of Wisconsin at Madison. He has written widely on various aspects of 20th century American history and is author of the first scholarly biography of Marcus Garvey, Black Moses, the story of Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association from 1955. All right, and we're in chapter 16 of this book. All right, an answer to Garvey's appeal to white America. And it says, because Garvey believed that all men should be proud of their race, he admired whites who openly championed racial purity. All right, he's talking about white supremacists and the social separation of the races in America. He considered them for less hypocritical than the white backers of the NAACP, who profess to believe in integration and equal rights for Negroes. I guess two extremes, right? This thoroughly racist view of American society led Garvey into a strange flirtation with the Ku Klux Klan. The what? With the KKK? He was dealing with the KKK and other white supremacy groups who stand against race mix and parallel that of the UNIA. All right? Such contacts with white extremists were denounced by other Negro leaders as a betrayal, of course, but Garvey merely labeled his critics amalgamationists and mongrelizers. All right? Just like Walter Plecker was calling your ancestors mongrels, Garvey was doing the same. One of his white backers was John Powell of Anglo-Saxons Club of America. All right? John Powell, very famous with this Anglo-Saxons Club of America. They're openly white secret order society. Again, a white supremacy organization based in Richmond, Virginia. Shortly after Garvey's imprisonment in 1925, Powell assured that the UNIA membership in a speech at Liberty Hall that they could count on the support of Southern whites in their efforts to secure the release of their martyred leader. All right, they helped them basically get out of jail. All right, now it says, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, I have never in my life been more touched and more moved than by the cordial reception you have given me and my friends tonight. I wish I were an orator so that I might give adequate expression to the feelings and the thoughts that are moving in me. I would like to tell you how it was that I came to know more about your organization and the purposes for which it stands. Major Ernest Sevier Cox, a man who spent 6 years of his life traveling all around the world in order to study racial problems in various parts of the world, wrote a book called White America. All right, listen to this. Now, Major Cox was for several years in Africa. He worked in the mines of South Africa. He went through the whole length and breadth of Africa, from the Cape up to Cairo, studying the various problems that came under his observation. He wrote this book, White America, the purpose of which was to find a real and ultimate solution to the great problem which has vexed the mind and heart of all America, now for 200 years and more. His book was very violently criticized by certain newspapers which I believe are under the influence of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. This is, I think, Marcus Garvey talking, all right? So it was a great surprise as well as a great pleasure to Major Cox when he received a letter from a member of the Garvey organization in St. Louis. His letter told Major Cox that its writer had seen a copy of White America, so they had read the book, had read it and felt tremendously encouraged to find that there was a white man advocating essentially the cause of the Garvey movement. You hear this? He wrote that there were many things in that book which he could not approve of, as his point of view was different, but it was a great joy to the members of the chapter of the Universal Negro Improvement Association to find that there was a white man who was seriously advocating those very purposes for which Marcus Garvey stood. You see that? Now it says here, Major Cox's letter. He requested Major Cox to write a letter to be read before the branch of your organization. Major Cox wrote a very strong and very moving letter, which was read by Mr. Ditto before his organization, and he wrote back to Major Cox and said, I wish you could have been here to have seen the enthusiasm with which your letter was received. Our members are reading and studying White America. He's talking about the United Negro Association, right, that Marcus Garvey said. They're reading this book on this white supremacist, right? And many of the members have said that White America should be in every Negro's home, along with the Bible. You hear that? Marcus Garvey's followers, right? Major Cox was naturally very pleased with this, and later, when Mr. Ditto asked if he might publish the letter, Major Cox suggested that he enlarged on the letter. The result of that was a little pamphlet which Mr. Cox wrote and published, entitled Let My People Go. That was Mr. Cox. It is a message from white men who wish to keep the white race white to black men who wish to keep the black race black. And it is dedicated to Marcus Garvey. All right, he dedicated to Marcus, of that great leader who has sought to do for his own race what the greatest of white America sought to do for that race, and to encourage the race to do for itself. None other than Abraham Lincoln. Now says this, with Marcus Garvey in Atlanta. This pamphlet was brought to the attention of your great leader, and he corresponded with Major Cox. And last June, when I went down to Georgia to address the Georgia legislature in favor of a bill for the preservation of racial integrity, I went to the prison to see Marcus Garvey. All right, listen to this. He got visited by these people in prison, these white supremacists. All right. Now, I expected to see a man with bowed head. I expected to see a man depressed and unhappy and embittered, because in the meantime I had read his appeal to the soul of white America, and it had touched me to the heart. Oh, he felt bad for Garvey, all right? So he's a white supremacist, right? You know, but he felt bad for Garvey, all right? But remember, all right, Garvey's a Freemason, right? This other dude, most likely a Freemason, so in secret circles, they're buddies. They're just pretending. They're doing this whole charade. Oh, it's because we stand for the same things. No, yeah, you guys are both certain degree Freemasons, probably. All right. Again, it says, when I saw him, I saw a man with head erect, with eyes open and clear, unashamed and unafraid, free from all bitterness, free of rancor. Not one word of complaint escaped his lips, not one word of bemoaning. His one thought was for you, his people, his loyal followers. And we discussed these matters. I found that in every essential principle, the ideals and ideas of Marcus Garvey were identical with those of the organization which I have the honor to represent, the Anglo-Saxon clubs of America. All right, they were the same. Cox is letting you know this white supremacist, known, right? We've already read, all right, supporting Garvey. We stand for the same thing, all right? Really? These same people who would hang your ancestors, so Garvey, would you hang white people too if they were on your, if you said you went to their country and you took their land and you hung them and then you misclassified them? So you're saying you do the same thing to them? I mean, you guys do represent the same thing. There was nothing that Marcus Garvey could not say frankly and freely to me without danger of misunderstanding. There was nothing that I could not say to Marcus Garvey openly and frankly and freely without danger of misunderstanding. And I realized that I was in the presence of a man of the highest idealism, in the noblest courage and the profoundest wisdom, a man dedicated to a noble and sacred cause, the cause of the independence and integrity of his race. All right? Now it says here, the Negro is awake. One more thing, a member of your organization in Detroit got in touch with Major Cox and asked him to send out 50 copies of White America. They ordered 50 more. Major Cox sent the copies out. A few days later, he received a letter saying that before the package was opened, all the copies were disposed of. Please send 250 more. Major Cox did not have 250 copies to send, but sent what he had. All right, so they're asking, all right, the Marcus Garvey organization, the United Negro, all right, UNIA is asking for more copies of this book, White America, White Supremacist book, because they're loving it. All right. So he's like, oh man, I don't got that many, but I'll send you what I have. A few days later, he received a letter from Detroit saying that there were several Negroes acting as book agents in Detroit, selling White America to white people in Detroit. They were making money off it, yo. Send those books. We'll sell them. So it's not, there's a lot of benefits in it, not just because they want to spread that, but it's a hustle, right? Within 2 weeks, 17,000 copies of Major Cox pamphlets were used in Detroit. You see what these people were doing for them? Think of what that means. It means that the Negro in the United States is today awake. He is aroused. He listens no longer to flattery and the blandishments of the politician. He is beginning to look facts in the face because they're helping these white supremacists. That's what he's giving them props, right? Now he's giving Negroes props. This white supremacists. It means that at least in Detroit, and I believe over the whole length and breadth of this land, the Negroes begin to show more clearly the way towards a real solution of this problem than the white man who considered himself so wise. All right, so they're doing more hustling than they would ever do. They would have never been able to sell or get 17,000 copies of that in Detroit. See how they got helped by Marcus Garvey? It was a joy to me to realize that there were such men as the members of your organization in St. Louis and Detroit. It was a bitter mortification to me to realize that the members of your organization were doing spontaneously what I have been laboring for 10 years to get the people of my race to do. White people wouldn't go out there and hustle like that. And I want to congratulate you from the bottom of my heart for the courage and independence that you are showing in facing those facts and seeing them clearly and distinctly. And I speak to you not merely as a white American, I speak to you as a Virginian. I speak to you as a descendant of a slave owner. What? All right, he's proud of it. The South says here, the Nuwaubian Nation, Black Spirituality and State Control by Susan J. Palmer. All right, haven't heard of these guys in a while, huh? Now it says here, Black Freemasonry is a major source of esoteric symbols and rituals in Black nationalist movements. Many outstanding Black nationalist philosophers in America were Freemasons, including Marcus Garvey Jr. and Sr. All right, his dad too. His dad was a Freemason. You see all the privileges Marcus Garvey had. Well, his dad was connected. Who were Prince Hall Masons. Did you know Marcus Garvey was a Prince Hall Mason? According to Schreider, the UNIA was organized along Masonic lines. Garvey's potentate helmet closely resembled the ceremonial hat worn by Prince Hall Masons in their parades. We're back in the book, The Marcus Garvey and Universal Negro Improvement Association Papers. All right, Volume 1, by Robert A. Hill, Marcus Garvey, Universal Negro. All right, and we're going to talk about something else here. Now it says that the essential fraternal character of the UNIA did not go unnoticed. In 1922, in his perceptive analysis of Garvey and the UNIA, Hodge Kernon stated that there is no identification that Garvey meant it, the UNIA, to be anything more than a fraternal order. That was his own little lodge he was creating, his little order, secret society. Harry Albro Williamson, the leading bibliophile of Black Masonry, later wrote an important article on Prince Hall Masonry for the Negro World. Amy Jacks Garvey later recalled that Garvey became a Mason, all right, that's his wife, through the influence of Johnny Bruce and Mr. Dr. F.W. Illigor. While he did not attend Masonic meetings, he was always too busy, so the connection dropped. Moreover, she disclosed that UNI chapters operated quite freely within the ranks of black fraternities, all right? During the final 4 years of his life, Garvey turned even more emphatically towards the Masonic ideal based on secret knowledge. With the defeat of Ethiopia and the Italo-Ethiopian War, 1935 and 36, and the rapid escalation of militarism throughout Europe and Asia, Garvey revised dramatically his previous estimates of what political movements alone could be expected to accomplish. Thus, he viewed as problematic the absence of Masonry in the Negro's political idea. You have to be Mason. Nothing that there is nothing secret in what he is aiming at for his own hope of preservation. Garvey was alluding to the evolution of fraternal idea from its earliest craft stage into the potent.
All right, so y'all see this? I mean, this guy here, man, he has some great videos, and we're gonna see some more of them up here. But I'm hoping you guys enjoyed that. And I mean, shouldn't be anybody offended. I mean, this is what it is. I mean, we just deal with truth up here. And I mean, if you can sit up and watch a video about the Khazarians, then you should be able to see a video about your own folk, because all these guys. We're gonna show you this. We're gonna show you. I mean, I got a few of these. Not just from this guy. I got sources from all over. We're gonna show you about these so-called black leaders and who they really worship and who they really with. So with that being said, quick prayer, Ab Yahuwah, we just thank you for all things as always, Father. We praise your name. We thank you, Father, for your goodness, your kindness, and your mercy. We thank you for your just watching over us, Father, making sure we got everything we need, feeding us, clothing us. I mean, we can't take anything for granted because you do all these things. We praise you, Father. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. We ask that you hear this prayer, Father. Remember us, Father. Please remember us, Father. Remember those that come up here and trying to search for this information, those that are hungry, Father, and those that have a short attention span, like the fire under them, Father. They just want to do like Second Ezra said, just devour this word, devour this good wisdom that you give us. We thank you, Ab Yahuwah, for all things. In Yahushua HaMashiach's name we pray. Hallelujah. All right, y'all. Good night.